I am recording. It's telling me that I am recording. All right. Thank you very much. Hello, class. We are starting chapter 7 on the topic of infancy, social and emotional development of infants. As soon as I figure out how to make this thing move forward here. Okay. And as you know, we don't need to take time to look at learning objectives because we're going to learn the learning objectives as we go through this. Okay, thank you very much. Truth or fiction? Don't need to linger there because we're going to find out what is true and what is false about infants in this case, social and emotional development. Somehow this doesn't seem to be moving with me as fast as I'd like it to. There we go. Okay. Attachment is what we're going to look at first. Very important experience, hopefully, that will happen between mother and baby. Emotional tie between one animal or person, in other words, organism, and another specific individual within that same species, if you will. Bowlby believed attachments are essential to an infant's survival, and certainly when we looked at failure to thrive, where there was a lack of attachment and the babies failed to thrive. They died. Separation anxiety, we looked at that already in a previous chapter, where without a sure sense within the infant's radar, to use a non-scientific term, that she is accepted, loved, cared about, important, she will develop separation anxiety when mother leaves the room because she's not sure how mother feels about her. Is mother going to return? All that stuff we learned already. So it is indeed experienced by the infant when contact cannot be maintained with the caregiver. There are patterns of attachment. Is there a class in here? Okay. I'm sorry, class, for the interruption on this recording. Some students walked in the room because I've got the room reserved for a while. So you guys can be here, except you can't say much. Okay. All right. Back to patterns of attachment. Okay. Secure attachment has, of course, the best. That's what we aim for, where the child will mildly protest that mother is out of the room, but the child will seek interaction when she comes back. Avoidant attachment, we know already from a previous class that the baby simply has learned he or she cannot really trust, so they avoid mom when she returns. It's a defense mechanism, if you will. We also looked at ambivalent, which also is the same thing as resistant attachment, but we didn't say a whole lot about it. So, the child will show severe distress when mother leaves, but will be iffy, ambivalent when she returns. Both come here, get away kind of behavior. Whereas disorganized or disoriented attachment the baby is dazed and contradictory behaviors happen towards mom. So, I think that we've talked a lot about secure and insecure, so I'm going to skip that. Any review you want to do, certainly you're going to do that. So what are the roles of the parents in terms of the kind of attachment that the child is going to develop? So high quality care, obviously, like you don't need a textbook to tell you that. Intergenerational transmission. So not just the child needing that assurance, that closeness, that bond from mom, the child needs to sense that it exists within the family, period, grandparents, siblings, and so forth. Parent support services can help with regard to teaching mom how to cause that to happen with the child. Okay. Now, we've talked about temperament a lot. Infant's temperament and caregiver's behavior. I've talked about how easy, difficult, slow to warm, or mixed temperaments do indeed affect the world, the interaction, the life of the child. Fathers need some attention because it's usually talk about mom. So with regard to fathers, even with societal changes, there are still qualitative and quantitative differences between father-infant and mother-infant interactions. What determines an infant's attachment to their father? Well, the quality of the time, the quality, not the quantity, the quality of the time the father spends with the baby is super important. So he may not have all the time in the world to be with the baby, but when he's with the baby, he's doing a marvelous job of talking to, playing with, just doing wonderful things that capture the baby's attention, capture the baby's heart, if you will. Affection in the interactions is what I'm talking about there. So how stable are the bonds of attachment? When caregiving remains constant, attachment remains constant. Makes sense. Adopted children can overcome early insecure experience in their family of origin if they are adopted into a family that's far more suited to give them psychological, emotional health, attachment, security. Early attachment patterns tend to endure even into adulthood. If you catch that child early enough, that adopted child early enough, that's going to replace, move away the insecure, the ambivalent, or the anxious, or the avoidant, and get replaced by healthy. Stages of attachment include what you see there, and in the interest of time, and acknowledging your individual intelligence and seriousness, I'm going to let you study those stages because they are named and the age ranges that go with them are covered. The only thing, however, with all of that said, is that there is a progression. First things have to happen first, followed by next things, building on top of the foundation. Okay? So, schools of thought exist within psychology, as you all are learning. So the cognitive, the behavioral, the psychoanalytic, as well as Harlow, a scientist whose name is Harlow, have their views. So the thinking view, the cognitive view of attachment, tells you that the infant must develop object permanence prior to being able to form attachment, which makes sense because you've learned that object permanence is the concept of the baby getting to the point of around 8 or 9 months old where they know that out of sight is not out of mind. They have to learn that. They have to learn that objects still exist, /mom, /dad, still exists even when they're out of the room. And at that point, when they have developed that knowledge, that ability to know that, they know when mom or dad leaves the room, they are still existing and they will return. If mom and dad has demonstrated that they will return over and over and over, they've demonstrated that. The behavioral school, which is, also learning, the learning school, but the behavioral school says that the caregiver becomes a conditioned reinforcer. So the baby learns by the fact that the caregiver has continually, repetitively returned that, oh, I can depend on them to continually return, and therefore attachment is the result of that. For behavioral thinking, it's not about feelings and emotions, it's just the learning of what's going to happen based upon what has happened repetitively. Psychoanalytic views of attachment, the caregiver satisfies the infant's needs, so food is given, thus trust is learned, thus I feel close, I feel attached. And Harlow says that contact comfort is the key. So make the baby feel warm and fuzzy, cozy, comfy. The baby is going to be just fine. They will feel attached. I am recording until 5:15. I've been given the room. All right. So there you go with what we've, I believe, viewed in a previous picture of the monkey choosing the terry cloth mother as much as it can, even though from time to time it has to leave comfort to go to the necessity place of getting fed, which is the wire monkey. Theories of attachment continue. There is the ethological view, which is saying that attachment is an inborn fixed action pattern. It's innate, where in humans, the babies smile in response to the human face or human voice, happens around 2 to 3 months, of life. And in non-humans, the fixed action pattern occurs during critical periods of something called imprinting. So Ainsworth, is Mary Ainsworth with the whole attachment thing? I'll let you just review and rehearse that. As you can tell, I've gotten interrupted a couple times by students wanting to come into the room, even though it's way before 5:30, as I'm in the midst of recording. So, when attachment doesn't happen, when it fails, obviously attachment can't happen whether we're talking monkeys or babies, human babies. It's not going to happen if you're isolated from your mother, from your caregiver. So the details about the monkeys are easy enough to understand. There are attempts, whether we're talking monkeys or people, when a child is deprived, abused, left alone, deprived, some level of improving upon that can happen depending on the point at which the child is rescued from their dire straits. And so with these monkeys, I'm sure the similar story could be told. Deprived monkeys are placed with younger monkeys, eventually expanding their contacts with them. Children who are socially withdrawn and placed with younger playmates make gains in social and emotional development. So deprivation can be improved upon to bring about socialization to a pretty good degree. So there are effects of being deprived. That's why I just used the phrase to a pretty good degree. Institutionalized children with little social stimulation encounter developmental problems. They may become withdrawn and depressed. That just makes common sense. And separation from primary caregivers may be detrimental, like, that makes sense, okay? Infants require sensory and social stimulation for appropriate development. Infants have much capacity to recover from being deprived, and I've already said that. So, neglect, abuse, 81% of victims are maltreated by a parent. So abuse in children, neglect within children is happening, that is happening because 81% of them have been maltreated by a parent, which means they're abused and they're in treatment, but there's an additional 19% of that abuse, of that neglect, that is happening not by a parent. Maybe these are kids in orphanages or just other pitiful situations that are not the direct result of maltreatment of a parent, but 81% of the time it is maltreatment by a parent. Okay, younger children have the highest rates of victimization because that makes sense, does it not? Because the younger the child, the less the child is able to communicate their situation to a responsible adult. So the perpetrator more easily can hide from getting caught if they are messing with the youngest children. The rest I'll leave up to you again for the reason I've already mentioned. So you can look at the percentages and the ages and discover that what I just said is true. The younger ages getting the highest percentage of abuse and neglect. And you can see the forms of abuse of all of those forms: physical, sexual, emotional, physical, as well as in the abuse category, as well as the neglect category. Okay, so the most, by far, abusive or maltreatment situation is the neglect situation. The least is medical neglect, but there is some maltreatment that falls into the category of unknown, but yet this is 0.3% of children that demonstrate maltreatment, though the professional who is working with the child can't determine exactly what kind of maltreatment. So the effects of child abuse and neglect: the abused children show high incidence of personal, social problems and psychological disorders. Well, of course, that's going to be the effect. That's going to be the result, where they are less securely attached to their parents, they are less intimate with their peers, they're more aggressive, angry, and non-compliant. Well, that makes common sense. They are folding themselves up into their own protective shells the best they can to protect themselves from a world they have learned early in life cannot be trusted. Whether you're my parent, my sister, my brother, or my supposed friend, you're out to get me. I've got to protect myself. Causes of child abuse and neglect include situational stress, history of child abuse in at least one parent's family of origin, and all the other stuff that's listed there. I will just say that even though it breaks one's heart to have to study child abuse, child neglect, maltreatment, that in taking classes like this, learning things that you are learning over the course of this child development coursework, you're taking it because you want to learn how to be the best caregiver you can be, whether with your own child or your future child or children, or you want to be working in a daycare facility or a teacher of young children, what have you. You have an interest in children. So you're certainly the choir that this semester is preaching to, so to speak. You're not going to be guilty of these kinds of sad things that we have to study. But just as it says here that the parents serve as role models, so can teachers and daycare workers and other such protective adults. Hopefully the children that you are involved with, especially if they are your very own, won't see violence in your home. Okay? That's just detrimental to their development. So there is also the misbelief that everybody hits their child. Some people, having been raised that way, where whatever you did wrong, the punishment was an automatic getting hit, they came probably from a history, a culture, a family lineage. That's what they did. But it is not true that everybody hits their child. There are other ways to discipline. So also, if they have come from an insecure attachment style, then there you go. They don't know how to be securely attached. So it's hard for them to become securely attached to their child. So, I think there's not too many of these pages left. But in any event, I had some issues with setting up the recording situation today and got started much later than I had planned, given the time that I have been allotted for this room. So I know that I'm not giving you the full PowerPoint, but you have access to it in the files section in Canvas anyhow. So with that said, this is at least of some help that I've been able to do this much for today. All right.